Hello, lovely people. Welcome to Ari Talks About Music. I'm Ari, and today it is time for a review of the new Callous Daoboys album, I Don't Want to See You in Heaven. I Don't Want to See You in Heaven is the third album from the American metalcore band the Callous Daoboys, who over the last few years have been slowly but steadily building up a very strong catalogue of great metalcore and mathcore albums, and just doing a fantastic job at blending the two genres together, which is something that they are seen doing incredibly well on this album, not only with mathcore and metalcore, but with various other genres that they know to incorporate there as well. As well as this album brings us some of their most conceptual work yet, having moments of being so theatrical and there almost being somewhat of a kind of lore to this album too, which is briefly mentioned on the opening track that's more of just an intro than anything, Collection of Forgotten Dreams, which does give the album quite a dramatic and suspenseful spoken word introduction, just in the way that it presents the band and the project in a very cryptic and mysterious way, and just like I said earlier, does provide somewhat of some lore to the album as well. And then Schizophrenia Legacy is the first proper song on the album and really does cut to the chase pretty much immediately. It kicks off with these epic chugging mathcore guitar riffs, and on top of the shouty vocals as well, it is a headbanger of a song. And then the slightly more calmer and melodic moments are just great, just to provide you with some breathing room within all of the complete insanity on the rest of the track. And I think that the song is already demonstrating the really good balance between the mathcore and the metalcore and even other genres too, with there even being a very brief jazz interlude that does actually sound really good in the mix. Full Moon Guidance does then focus a lot more on the pure mathcore than anything else, with the brilliant and unpredictable guitar riffs and of course the absolutely insane drumming. I think that the complete lack of structure on this track actually really works in its favour, and only further manages to drive the point home of how insane and wild the whole thing is. Two-Headed Trout, despite being so much more on the melodic side so far, still has a lot of the wild time signatures and crazy guitar riffs going on. And while at least compared to the first two tracks, the first half of this track is much more laid back and much more melodic. Going into the second half, it then just becomes completely unhinged once again, and the guitar playing and the vocals are just so insane on this song that it almost just makes my throat hurt listening to it. And also the transition into the next song, Tears on Lambo Leather, is absolutely fantastic, as this one then only goes even further deeper into the sheer aggression and insanity. And once again, the complete lack of structure has to be one of the best features of the song. With no clear-cut verse or chorus, it's just 3 minutes of complete raw and unhinged metalcore. And even towards the end, you have this brief, almost kind of breakbeat, dancey interlude, which again, somehow they manage to incorporate such a ridiculous palette of genres and they make it work pretty much every time. And then going into the next track, Lemon, this one is a huge departure from the typical metal and mathcore sound of the rest of the album, with this one being much more of an almost electronic-leaning alt rock song. And I think despite some of this album's insane genre combinations that it does manage to pull off, this one I don't think works so well. I think a lot of that can just be down to the fact that I don't think this song is all that good to begin with, regardless of the genre combinations, with it feeling quite repetitive and unfocused for most of it. But also because it's more than just a moment so far, whether it be jazz or breakbeat or whatever it is, it's only for a couple of moments on a song, but this one is an entire track, and it does feel like it's kind of interrupting the flow more than anything really. Although having said that, I think that Body Horror for Birds, despite being a much slower and calmer track, does genuinely work quite well. I think it just comes down to the transition into Lemon being quite harsh because of how insane of a sound shift it is, but now that the album is somewhat slightly more committed to that sound, the transition definitely isn't quite as harsh. But this song is genuinely quite heartfelt and beautiful, as well as being much more interesting and I think well structured despite its simplicity compared to the previous song. And I think that the outro is genuinely one of the best moments on the whole song, just with its use of very quiet but still very grand string instruments. And despite there being so little going on sonically, it's still a track that manages to captivate me for its entire runtime. And despite the brief calmer run of tracks, the album is far from done with the metal and mathcore. The Demon of Unreality Limping Like a Dog is a track that comes straight in a transition that really feels like it shouldn't work but somehow does. And once again, the riffs on this track are insane, the vocals are insane, there really is just everything to love about it, as it just presents you with every virtue of this band's expertise. And on the whole, just the way everything is structured, it feels completely unstoppable and it just keeps going. And the amount of power and the amount of momentum that is displayed here is just insane. I think that the bark barking towards the end of the track is maybe just taking it a little bit too far, which, I get it. Obviously, it's meant to showcase just how wild and insane this song is, but I think it's maybe just doing that a little bit too much when you get to the point where you're making animal noises, which I think is something that can also be said for the following track, Idiot Temptation Force, which again, I love this track for how wild and insane it is. It does a great job at that. However, the constant repetition of the phrase ugga ugga boo boo ugga, I think is just again taking it a little bit too far and just driving the point home just too much that this song's meant to be insane. And just, I think, to the point where it starts to feel kind of weird and silly more than anything, which is far from the vibe this album's trying to give off. And for that reason, it does kind of remind me a little bit of a typical Korn song, with the way they incorporate a lot of kind of stupid noises and phrases into their lyrics. However, I think on the whole, they're a band who take themselves a little less seriously, so I think they generally pull it off better. Douchebag Safari has a pretty unsuspecting start, just sounding like it's going to be another very basic and simple alt rock song. And it does commit to that for a couple of minutes, however, it does eventually get to showing off some really interesting kind of Death Grips-esque sound effects. And then, of course, pretty much out of nowhere, it just goes back to the insane metalcore, and I think does a fantastic job at doing that. I think at this point in the project, I really don't have much more insight to provide on why they're good at doing this mathcore, but it's just great. I love the guitar riffs, I love the vocals, there's just everything to love about it. Distracted by the Mona Lisa has to by far be one of the most unique songs here, just with the absolutely beautiful open and the way it gives you all of these very dreamy and spacey sound effects. It really does make you feel like you're floating. I'd also love the very prominent emo influence on this track, making it feel a lot heavier and a lot more emotional. And while the mathcore has definitely been toned down quite a lot on this track as it focuses more on emo and a little bit of metalcore as well, the guitar playing is still absolutely fantastic, and it still features a lot of the signature sounds that this album has shown off very well so far, just with the unpredictability of it all and the insane type signatures as well. And then Country Song in Reverse, as long as the intro to this song is, it still creates this absolutely fantastic and very moody atmosphere. And then, of course, the metalcore really does start to kick in, and the vocals on this moment genuinely do showcase some of the most genuine passion and pain on the whole project. And a lot of the various different sections that this song goes through as well are just also incredible and unique in their own way. And then I genuinely just have absolutely no words for the brief moment where they do a small cover of a section of Björk's pagan poetry, which is just such an insane and bold choice for what else to put in this closing track. And the sheer audacity to just put this in there honestly just completely distracts me from whether it's even actually working or not, because it's just such an unexpected influence that they would take. I will say though that I do really like the transition out of this moment, the way that it slowly starts to incorporate the much more aggressive vocals in there, and then just goes back into the metalcore, of course. And then the next segment of the track, which is what ultimately ends it, has to be definitely one of my favorites too, just with the very avant-garde horn sections that feel very Maruja inspired, but of course still with the classic metalcore vocals that have been present on the whole album, and I think combined with a lot of the instruments on this moment definitely do make it very unique, and I think end the song and the album very well. And so I really do think that this is absolutely one of the best and most unique, and of course one of the most theatrical metalcore albums I've heard in a long time. From all of the insane influences, from obviously the mathcore being very prominent, to even the brief jazz, dance, and even the Björk influence, which still just blows me away that they somehow managed to make it work. But this is absolutely a very unique album in the way that it takes a genre that's typically not all that theatrical or conceptual, but still manages to do a fantastic job at making it such, and which is why I'm going to give this album an 8 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching this review. Please be sure to listen to this album yourself and tell me your thoughts below. Please leave a like if you liked the video, and please leave a dislike if you didn't like the video, and remember to stay hydrated.